Everyone, welcome back to the Freedom First podcast. Our guest today is a medical doctor and a California native from Northern California. He is a board-certified doctor by the American Board of Family Medicine. He obtained his bachelor's degree from the University of California, Irvine, and his medical degree from Tulane School of Medicine on a full Navy scholarship. Following medical school, he was commissioned into the United States Navy, completed residency training in family medicine at the Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton, and served 7 years on active duty. He served 2 combat tours in Iraq in 2004 and 2008, and was awarded the Navy Commendation Medal with Valor for his actions in the Battle of Fallujah in April of 2004. As the senior medical officer at his naval clinic, he was responsible for the medical oversight of active duty members, their families, and local veterans. Upon completion of his naval service, he was honorably discharged as a lieutenant commander and opened his own family medicine practice called Wilkes Family Medicine in August of 2009. Today, he serves as the president and medical director of Summit Health Group in Thousand Oaks, California. He's a devoted husband, father, and Christian. He says, "My faith and family are everything to me, and I have dedicated this practice to them." He is the author of a best-selling book called Code Red Fallujah, a doctor's memoir at war, which is about his experience during the Battle of Fallujah. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Donnelly Wilkes. Dr. Donnelly Wilkes, I appreciate you joining the show today, and I know you're busy with everything going on, and thank you for your valuable time. Appreciate it.
You got it, Blaine. Happy to be here.
All right, so on the Freedom First podcast, we have a little segment called the Freedom Minute, just some rapid fire questions to kind of get us warmed up into the conversation today. So the first one is, what does freedom mean to you?
Great question. To me, well, I guess that would be a sum of my life experiences, and really I would boil it down to what it means to be an American, and that is the roots of where we came from. I'm a big fan of reading about our founding fathers, their life stories, the history of how our nation was born. And so everything it took for that to happen, for our nation to be born and be what it is today, that's what freedom means to me. All those little things and those values that culminated in the birth of our nation and the maintenance of our nation and our democracy is what it means to me.
Greatest failure you've learned from in your life?
To understand, to accept that you're not perfect, that in order to thrive, you have to make mistakes, forgive yourself, and forgive others, and then move on. And know that you will be improving yourself every time you do that. Even when you think you're right, even when maybe to your core you know you're right. If you question that once in a while, that's okay. Or if you come up with a new paradigm and a new view, a new vision, that you're just improving upon yourself.
I love that message. Most memorable childhood moment.
Good one. Let's see. I think that'd be my first big game hunt, we'll call it, for a deer, buck, with my father, and just going through what that experience was like, the thrill of it, the camaraderie in it, the appreciation for the animal, and even eating it and having it become, part of me. The whole circle of life of that was a great moment for me as a child.
Obviously you've had different moments in your life and experienced a lot of different things, whether it's in the medical profession, in your educational profession, or in your military experience. What's been the most, frightening moment or experience you've had in your career?
I would say, I'd have to go to a few moments in Iraq, and that was to realize fully my mortality. And to be clear on that, it was that one of those mortars, a rocket, was meant for me and landed close enough to either knock me down or rattle my bones, and how close to potentially leaving this earth I was, and that feeling and understanding that feeling at that moment.
Well, I appreciate that perspective, and just, man, I can only fathom that experience. I always believe leaders are readers, right? And whatever profession you're in, whether it's medical or education or in the military, what's a book you would recommend or a favorite book you would have?
I think I have to say I just loved John Adams by David McCullough. It is, whether you are a history buff or not, just reading about one man's perspective who was integral in the birth of our nation and some of the details, just his interaction with men like Jefferson, George Washington, and what went on back then for this country to defeat the British and then become its own nation. Unbelievable, pure miracle, and some of the values and lessons from the book are just top notch.
I have that book in my library. I haven't got a chance to pull it out just yet, but might have to after this.
It's a good one, and of course, they made a movie after it. The book's better, obviously.
Right. Last question I ask every guest: if you could sit down and have a conversation with anyone throughout history, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Yeah, man. So yeah, I'm definitely. I have to go back to the founding fathers on that one, and that's got to be G-Dub, George Washington. Just to hear his mindset of what was going through his head and going up against the mightiest military power in the world, all for the goal and effort of forming our nation. Just hearing what his thoughts were, his strategy, how he thought he'd persevere, and that weight on his shoulders. Love to hear what he had to say. But again, there's a lot of books and memoirs from his life that are telling in that insight.
Yeah, I mean, what an amazing conversation that would be, and it's so powerful just to be able to read about these people, right, and these memoirs and these stories written about these guys, and we can still learn from them today, and carry that into our own lives, our own profession. So.
That's right, because it wasn't that long ago. It was a blip on the radar in the history of a nation, and they're not ghosts. These are real people that walk the same ground that we did not long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell, whether it's my students or people, it's like, I mean, these founding fathers or our country's so new. Like, if you look at the whole perspective of the world, back to ancient history and everything else, it's our country of the United States is so new still, and we're still always learning. But this document that was created, this Constitution, the greatest document in the history of the world, I believe, that we've been able to persevere through obstacles and continue on and going. So
absolutely, and every young person should hear that and know that and study it.
Let's jump into your story, Dr. Wilkes. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like? What did your parents do? What was that whole dynamic kind of growing up that led you kind of to where you are today?
Yeah, I'll give you a snapshot. I was born in Los Angeles area in the Valley at a very young age 3 or 4. My parents moved to Northern California, to El Dorado County. We lived in a few towns within El Dorado County, which is east of Sacramento in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas, not far from South Lake Tahoe. And that's where I grew up my entire childhood, all the way through high school. My father was a contractor. My mother was a mother of 5 boys and 1 daughter. And so that was her full-time job. And, we lived on 5 acres. My dad is one of the hardest working men I know. And he put us to work at a young age. So we were out on his job sites from really when I can remember. And he would give us allowances and then started paying us when we were old enough to do meaningful work. And that's what I did every summer and sometimes on the weekends. He coached us in baseball and soccer and other sports. So sports was a big part of our life. They definitely valued academics, but never necessarily, drilled it into us. It kind of came naturally to me. I enjoyed school. I thrived in it. I loved getting good grades. And so it suited me. And, I put my heart and soul into my education, especially when I knew what it could get me someday. And I think my drive, as far as I can remember, when it clicked in of, hey, I'm going to take my education and do something with it, was probably in middle school, when I thought, I love working with my dad and on construction sites, but it's pretty hard work, and I don't think I want to use my body for the rest of my life. So I'm going to see where this education thing goes. Yeah. So I just kind of put my head down and went for it in high school, tried to get top-notch grades so I could get into college. That's when, one day my father said, "Hey, what are you going to do with your life?" And I said, "Well, maybe, I'm thinking about the medical field or health professions, maybe physical therapy, be a physical therapist, or, physician assistant." And he said, "Well, why don't you just be a doctor?" And I said, "Well, that's pretty hard, Dad, a lot of school." And he didn't blink. He said, "Well, you can do it." And I just thought, well, you're right. I think I can do it. So that was my goal. I set my sights on medicine, and I never looked back.
Did it get, obviously you had you gained a different perspective and a lot of work ethic from your dad, right? Growing up, working construction, and you realize you don't want to work that, not, I wouldn't say work that hard, but work that kind of work. Did he give you a lot of confidence and kind of believing in yourself? It sounds like.
Yeah, for sure. He basically instilled the belief in me that there's nothing I can't do. With that said, he's a realist. If came to a point where the challenge was telling us we needed to adjust our course, then we'd adjust our course. But until then, he was going to support me and, push me as far as and as hard as I wanted to go. He also, at age 36, 37, had a second career as a sheriff in El Dorado County. That was always a dream of his, to be in law enforcement. So, watching him go through the sheriff's academy as, an older guy, which 36 doesn't sound like it right now, was inspiring. And his father, my grandfather, who lived down the street from us, he was a World War II vet. He flew P-38s in World War II, and North Africa, was shot down by the Germans, survived. Wow. And so, service, law enforcement, and the military had some roots in our family. And that always kind of sang to me. And so as I graduated high school and entered college at University of California, Irvine, and was pursuing, that pre-med degree, I started also kicking around the idea of military service.
Yeah, so it sounds like just service in general was a part of your, just like instilled in you, whether your grandfather and then obviously your father ended up being a sheriff, right? So whether that was the medical profession or, obviously going into the military. So what made that decision to, number one, go into medical, and then the utmost decision to kind of get that scholarship and have it paid for through the military? What was that dynamic like?
Yeah. I think the decision to become a physician, it was multifaceted. There was not one singular item, but in the end, I think it was just the honor and tradition of the profession itself. I just loved the origins and the history of medicine, practicing medicine. And, I won't lie, I wanted to do something that pushed me to my limits academically, mentally, and even spiritually. And, you can find all of that within the practice of medicine. So I set my sights on that and said, hey, if I can achieve that, that's what I want. I want that MD behind my name. And so as I went forward and started applying to medical school after graduating UC Irvine, a Navy recruiter got a hold of me and, started asking, hey, how are you going to pay for medical school? And have you ever thought about the military? And so we talked a little bit, and as he explained it to me and I started considering it, it really suited me. I started talking to some other people, getting a little bit of glimpse of what life in the military might be like. And I made the decision to apply for, and when it was granted to me, accept the Navy scholarship for medical school. And when you do that, you are committing to at least 7 years in the Navy after you graduate medical school. So you have to really look far ahead to know that it's what you want to do. But I did my best and signed on the dotted line, and then they paid for my entire 4 years of medical school at Tulane, and in turn, I owed them 7 years of active duty service.
So you went to Tulane for medical school. What was kind of your direction? Was there a specific kind of area of medicine you wanted to practice, and what was that whole experience like going to Tulane and going through medical school?
Tulane was the best choice I ever made. New Orleans, Louisiana, it's its own world. It's just a different part of the United States, rich with history and different climates, different food, a culture there, an amalgam of different people from different parts of the world. So it took me about a year, with that said, to make it feel like home. But for all those reasons, it challenged me. I didn't know anybody. I just kind of hung my shingle there and made it my home. And I ended up being there for about 6 years total. And I loved it. The practice of medicine there has a deep history. It has one of the oldest community hospitals in the United States, one of the oldest medical schools in the United States. So all that history and opportunity just lends to a great training environment for medicine. And I ate it up. I loved it. And it was hard, I won't lie, but a lot of fun. I made some of my best friends that I still keep contact with there. And then during medical school, for military students, 1 month out of each year, all the military students have to go off and start their military training. So that, for me, that was 6 weeks in Rhode Island for officer training school, where you learn how to wear the uniform, understand the military history, salute, march, train, all those things. And then another year for a month, I would go out in the field and start understanding field medicine and some of the nuances that you'll need to, thrive in that environment. And then after graduation, just to kind of tell you when it all came full circle, we graduate in 2002, my whole class, in a theater downtown New Orleans, great party. And then the 15 or so military students are ushered off to a little room. We sit down, orders are on each of our tables in front of us. An officer comes in, stand at attention, salute, take the oath of office, and there you go. We're commissioned as lieutenants in the United States Navy. And so that was a real moment where everybody else is off partying and I'm understanding what it's going to be like. And keep in mind, that was around June, July 2002, and September 9/11 was just a few months prior. So my understanding of what my life was going to be like in the military was definitely changed forever, being post 9/11.
What did 9/11 did it give you that kind of pride? Like this was the right choice, and I'm glad I did this.
Yeah, there was a lot of things going through my mind. I definitely heard the drumbeat, as I think a lot of Americans did, of what can I do? How can I help? How can I be a part or of service? And of course, being in the United States Navy, I knew that my life would be different. I didn't quite know how, but by the time I graduated medical school, things were ramping up in the Middle East. We were getting intel briefs that the Al Anbar province, which is within the Sunni Triangle area of Iraq, there was a lot of unrest, a lot of insurgents, bedding down, and that potentially that might be an area of a target for the United States military. And so in short order, I'll just jump ahead, within just about a year of leaving medical school, I was plucked from residency training, which all doctors have to do at least 3 years before practicing independently. They plucked me out, and part of it was my choice, part of it was not, but I was put with a battalion of 1,000 Marines, and in short order, we were given orders to head off to Iraq.
So you go to Iraq, and what's your first kind of order, and like, what's that first deployment like? That was in 2004, I believe, right?
That's right. Yeah, we just prior to getting to Iraq, the whole battalion went to Okinawa, Japan for 3 months just to train in urban combat, and then from there to Iraq, and that was about March of 2004. You're right.
And so from there, you go to Fallujah. Where did you go on your first deployment in 2004? You were in kind of training, Fallujah. And then you went to Fallujah in 2004, because that was at the the beginning, those first couple of years that the war kind of kicked off. Did you, what was that experience like? I've kind of obviously read the book, and, heard you on different podcasts. A different perspective, like you get in there and it's a whole different world, right? It's a whole different mindset, and like, wow, like this is, I didn't know I was necessarily signing up for this. So what was that kind of initial experience like? And I mean, kind of looking back in the history of the war and back in 2004 and leading up to it, I mean, things kicked off real quick, and things got real.
They did. You're right. They certainly did get real. And I'll tell you, Blaine, it was like the Wild West. War is war, and in a lot of ways, it doesn't change over the centuries. Some of it is just bare bones, brutal, and combat in some ways hasn't changed over the years. A lot has, of course, but it was wild because, we were learning on the fly. You're right, things were getting real bad in the Al-Anbar province. And that 2004 to 2006 corridor is where a lot of the big battles happened, specifically the Battle of Fallujah. A lot of the books and movies that came out were that time frame. American Sniper, Lone Survivor, same corridor, same time frame. I overlapped in Iraq with some of those guys. And, my battalion, we assembled in Kuwait, all 1,000 men. And then we convoyed, which, wasn't very common as the war went on. But at that time it was 50 to 75 vehicles. And that was just awe-inspiring to see the mobile capabilities of our military. So 50 to 75 vehicles, everything from bullets to Band-Aids. For 3 days, we convoyed from Kuwait up into Iraq towards Fallujah. And those 3 days were just wild. And every step, every mile we took deeper into that ancient land just made me realize the gravity of my situation. I woke up one morning and looked out the window, and there's the oil rigs on fire that you had seen on CNN that Saddam had lit on fire. We encountered IEDs along the way. No major attacks or things like that. And after 3 days, we made it to our forward operating base, which was just a mile or two from Fallujah. Just a little teeny cinder block wall base. And we settled in. And within short order, we were getting incoming mortars. And that's when I knew that I wasn't in Kansas anymore, and the full weight of what was ahead of me was on my shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, just listening kind of to the book and different things that you've been on, like that was a huge experience for you, like some of those rockets hitting outside of the base. But then eventually, kind of later on, you talk about, man, there's a couple of instances where they came into the FOB, the forward operating base that you guys were in, and that the structure. But I mean, let's talk about, and we'll get into a book in just a few minutes, but the perspective from a military combat medic. It's very rare that we get that perspective. We get the amazing people of the special operations, the Navy SEALs, the Green Berets, and the Rangers, and those guys. See them in the movies, see them on these different documentaries on YouTube or Netflix or Amazon, whatever it is. But we don't always get the combat medic perspective. What were you seeing? You were obviously on the front lines, and you were the guy that these guys look to, whether it was the special operations guys or different Marines or whatever it was. What was that perspective like, and what was the task that you were there to do?
Yeah, good question. I think the best way I can explain the perspective for myself and probably, speaking for some of my Navy corpsmen as well, who are, the medics within the battalion. There's about 50 Navy corpsmen. Some are embedded within the companies of Marines, and then some are tasked to me, and they stick with me to be my right and left hands. And so for myself, I'm trained as a healer. That was my whole world, my whole life. All the way through medical school, into residency. Even in residency, I'm at a naval hospital. It's peaceful. It's a controlled environment. I'm trained as a healer. And then catapulted into a Marine Corps battalion, who are the tip of the spear, the warriors. But you are part of them. You wear the same uniform. You look the same. You can't tell, the difference between a Navy corpsman from a distance and a Marine. And then you're into combat. And so I'm trained as a healer, yet I have a 9mm pistol strapped to my chest next to my scalpel. I'm a non-combatant, but I'll use that pistol if I have to. And then as the battle ensued, then you're proximal to this violent battle, and you can see it playing out in front of you in some cases. So that was the challenge for me, understanding my role as a healer, but yet also being in this war environment, and it tugs at your emotions from both sides.
Someone listening to this podcast that maybe is maybe a combat medic, or maybe they want to kind of go in that direction. Kind of what was an experience that you had, like one of the first experience that you had where like it got real, and that you seen things happening, mortar, whether it's different wounds or mortar strikes and high alert situations. kind of put us in that perspective, or someone listening in that perspective. What was that moment like? Obviously, heart rate's up, and your practice that you've learned in medical school and in field training is put into practice right away. Walk us through that kind of that situation there. Some of the first situations that you've seen.
Sure. Yeah, there's many, but I'll give you one. Also, before I get into that, the other challenge, and when I talked about being pulled, is when you're in this combat environment as a healer, as a physician, as a medic, comes a time when you're attacked. Let's say it's indirect fire, mortars, rockets, gunfire, whatever, and you want to fight back, but you can't. That's not your role, and I have to remember that and tell myself that. And that's challenging because you want to fight back every ounce of your being. That's in our DNA, but you can't, or at least I can't. That's for my Marines. That's for the guys who are pulling triggers. So the experience that I'll tell you is, I'm jumping into about the middle of the book. The battle is in full swing in Fallujah. I'm going back and forth from the Cloverleaf, which was a tactical highway intersection in the field just outside Fallujah. So we're in the open air. But under a freeway overpass, and that's where we receive combat casualties. And I had transferred out after a few days for a shower and some hot chow back at our forward operating base, which was just a couple miles away. I get to the base. I'm just kind of winding down, took a shower, got some food. I'm listening and watching a movie on my laptop in my little bunkhouse. And just as I'm relaxing and let my nerves unwind, 2 rockets hit right outside my room. Another one not far away, 50 yards away. And they had never hit rockets in the base. They had always missed, because it's a pretty direct hit to get one right in our little base. Knocks me out of my chair. I could have sworn, Godzilla had picked up my room and shook it. This is how earth-shattering it was. After I come to my senses, I kind of crawl out of my room into the medical aid station. Men are running around everywhere. And then within just a few moments, about 6 to 7 Marines, come kind of straggling in. They're holding each other, arms around each other, and they're all wounded. And these guys had been injured by the shrapnel from the rocket blasts. Fortunately, none of them were fatal, but some guys had some pretty significant wounds. And so that moment of just being ready to unwind from, being close to the battle and being back at my base, and yet that goes completely away, was intense, to say the least. But we banded together, and it was also inspiring because me and these men, as I cared for them, you just bond with them, and that's something I'll never forget.
Yeah, and I mean, you give a huge boost of confidence to these guys, like, whoever it is, whether it's Marines or whoever you're working on, these other guys see that, right? And they say, we're in good hands. Like, if something happens to me, that's the kind of care I'm gonna get. So I could just imagine the confidence and that good sense that these guys have, that if something goes down, I'm gonna get that care. And I've heard you talk about this, whether it's in the book or on podcasts. Sometimes when you kind of know maybe someone's not going to necessarily, like, they don't have a great chance of making it, but it don't matter. Yeah. Sometimes it's more about that culture and that kind of camaraderie of saying, like, hey, even though I'm going to put all my effort, I'm going to put everything I have into this for this one human being, but also for the whole group of guys around me too.
That's right. You're absolutely right. The camaraderie is unbreakable, and it just binds you closer every second of the deployment, because you realize this is your family. These are your brothers. You're going home together no matter what. And it's a symbiotic relationship for me, and I think for the corpsmen, because, I know that those guys are out there protecting me, taking the fight to the insurgents, laying down fire. They know myself and the corpsmen are there in short order when they need us, and ready to do whatever we can to take care of them. So you're right, that tradition, that Navy Marine Corps tradition, goes back hundreds of years, actually, and it's a beautiful thing.
So you had 2 deployments, one in 2004 and one in 2008. What was the difference? Because obviously in 2004, they're still learning a lot. You still got some old technology. What was the
Yeah.
difference from 2004 to 2008, both technological wise and just the entire kind of operation, entire experience? What was the difference between the two deployments?
Yeah, big picture, it was vastly different, and the big picture view is, like I was saying earlier, 2004, the Wild West. Some of the vehicles were not fully up armored. We're rolling up in from Kuwait into Iraq, sometimes just in an open air Humvee or 7-ton truck sitting in the back of the truck. Or my ambulance had no armor on the walls. If we took a hit, it would have been like paper mache, with shrapnel coming through. We would commandeer metal plates when we stopped at little outposts along our convoy, and my corpsman would come in and say, "Hey Doc, I got you some metal plates," and they'd put them on the sidewalls of the vehicle. The medical equipment was the best we had, but there was some things we didn't have, and we had to just make do. And that's the main difference from field medicine to a controlled environment. In the field, you've got the heat, you've got your flak jacket, you're wearing a Kevlar helmet, you've got the battle in the background, and you're just making do the best you can, performing sometimes pretty invasive field surgical procedures. Whereas in a controlled environment, you've got doctors, nurses, invasive monitoring and tests, and you don't have anything like that in the field. So to answer your question, though, from 2004 to 2008, the military, just like back in the days of World War II, had time to put all their efforts back home into new technology, new vehicles. So in 2008, we had MRAP vehicles, which were like tanks on wheels, and you're just housed into this unbelievably well-armored, well-equipped, and weaponized vehicle to transport you. So there was no more open-air vehicles, at least for me, in 2008. Some of the surgical capabilities were already pretty good, but advanced to where they could bring a surgical field hospital within just minutes of the battlefield and perform life-saving surgeries right there in the field.
So obviously, what were some of the things that you were able to take away from the military? Probably very a lot of mental stuff, I would imagine, that you took back into the medical field skillfully, skill wise, and just that mental aspect. What were some of the things you kind of learned on the battlefield that you still would use today?
Yeah, I would say the greatest skills I learned were leadership. And specifically, to the best leaders throughout history and in the world, they recognize who around them that they need to empower. Who's that corpsman that's got that leadership that can take the lead on an injured Marine when I can't, and empower that sailor or Marine. Give them that job, give them that responsibility, because they're going to make you better. So recognizing that in my Navy corpsmen and fellow Marines, understanding that leadership skill and elevating others around you is huge. Then certainly my own leadership skills, being able to stay calm under fire, so to speak, to access that file cabinet, that skill that I had learned in field medicine, pull out that card and put it to use when the S has hit the fan, so to speak, and I've got 3 wounded Marines lying in front of me, how to prioritize, how to stay calm and go to work despite the chaos around me. Those are the greatest skills that I took with me from the battlefield into my civilian life. And ultimately, civilian medicine is not combat medicine. It's certainly vastly different. But being in that environment, being in the military for those 2 deployments, overall made me a better physician, a better husband, and a better human in general.
So, I mean, let's kind of jump into the book. What kind of led you to writing the book, and talk about the intentions of writing the book and telling those stories from a medic perspective. We talked about, it's very rare that we get that perspective. It's very rare that we get to see the different dynamics of a combat medic. We see the other the special operations and the different battles and stuff like that, but very rare we get to see a full scope of a combat medic. So what led you kind of to writing the book? Kind of talk about the process of the book and what was the intentions
Yeah,
of it?
you got it. The origins of the book, Code Red Fallujah, were written and kind of born on my second deployment. When I got the call to deploy again in 2008, it was, it was a little unexpected. It was certainly tugged at my emotions. I was married at that time. My wife and I, we were engaged, in our first deployment. So we knew what to expect. We knew we were in for a long haul, another 10 months of living in that environment. So part of the challenge of deployment is just passing the time. And I had to figure out a way how to help myself get through again. So I decided, I had a field journal from Fallujah. I took that field journal with me, and there just came a point where I thought, I'm going to start writing. And I accessed that field journal from Fallujah and started writing down some thoughts. Those became paragraphs, those became chapters. And then I thought, I'm just going to write an autobiography. So that's where the bones of Code Red Fallujah were born. And then when I came back home, I put it down for a while. I had my own kind of decompressing to do and, post-deployment life to figure out. And that took a couple years. And then I picked it up again. And over the years, I realized how big of an event the Battle of Fallujah was. It was the biggest, most violent battle of the entire 10-year Iraq War. I also realized, that it was pretty unique for a physician to be that close, that proximal to combat. There was just a handful of us that had that experience, and I'm honored that I did. And so I knew it was a unique event, and I thought that I had a unique perspective and that I had a story to tell. And so I wrote the book. And then over the years, that it took a number of years and revisions to make that book into a memoir that was a page turner that I thought people would value. And I worked with some good people to help mold it. But it's all my writing. I didn't have anybody, write it for me. And I got it to the finish line with the publisher. And now it's out. I'm very proud of it. And it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, so those of you that are listening, Code Red Fallujah, a doctor's memoir at war, very just unique perspective. And anyone that's listening that has maybe wants to go on that path, it's a must-read, page-turner like Dr. Wilkes said. You can find it on Amazon or, pretty much anywhere you find books, and then also on Audible. So incredible book. I really enjoyed it, and it's definitely a must-read.
Thanks for that. I appreciate that.
So let's kind of jump back into your story. So, you kind of you get out of the military and you go into the medical practice. So, what was that transition like? What were your immediate plans? Did you kind of know what you wanted to do and go into? How did that all work out?
Yeah, the transition out of the military. I'll just give you just a brief perspective of my experience. I think every warrior or someone who's been in the military in different avenues, we often think of people who go through, let's say, combat stress or PTSD, were right in the line of fire and things like that. But not necessarily. You encounter some mortars and rockets that pepper you for months to weeks on end, and you realize you're living at a 10 out of 10 while you're in that environment. And when you come home and transition to civilian life, your central nervous system, your sympathetic nervous system doesn't forget that easily. So it takes time to decompress. And it took me time. And I didn't realize that at first because I was the guy in charge of helping people with combat stress and PTSD. But I started having my own kind of hypervigilance, I'll call it. Some irritability, some anger issues, things like that. And it took me a while to realize it. I talk about it more now because I feel more validated, and the stigma of what PTSD or combat stress is removed. And I talked to some people, and I got some help, and I did well. So, fortunately, I didn't suffer immensely, but it's because I talked and because I got help, and realized that you're still a warrior, even though if you experience those things. And I involved my wife in it. Whatever struggle it is in your life, involve that loved one or that person that you trust and respect. And so that transition took a couple years, for some of the the vigilance to go away, some of the dreams, the nightmares to go away, and it did. And I attacked it, and that's what I encourage anyone else to do, and use the professionals that are out there. And then I had the skills to open my own medical practice. The Navy gave that to me because when you're in the military, in any avenue, if you're in long enough, you grow up quick. You're given responsibility quick. And so those skills I learned in the Navy took me to the next level in my personal life. I was able to open a private practice and make it thrive. So I've been doing that for, almost 15 years now. And I'll do it for the rest of my life.
So you opened your family medicine practice in 2009, right? The summer of 2009.
That's right.
What's it been like running your own practice? Obviously, you've gained a lot of leadership skills and stuff from both the military and medical school, and you persevered and transitioning out of the military. So has it been a huge benefit going through that military and taking that journey? And would you recommend it? Like, so maybe it's a kid that's looking, he's, maybe finishing his bachelor's degree and, one of the sciences or whatever, and wants to go to military. Is taking the path that you did is something you would recommend to others if they maybe have that mindset? And would you do it all over again?
I would do it over again. And I'll put an asterisk on that. If you gave me the playbook of what I was going to experience when I was signing up for the Navy scholarship, I probably would have thought twice. My Pacific Fleet tour that was advertised by the Navy recruiter post 9/11 suddenly became 2 combat tours and, a witness to a lot of violence and even death. But I would do it all over again. I wouldn't change it. It's who I am. And ultimately, and I talk about this in the book, although it was challenging for me to accept the proximity to the battle and the level of violence that I was witness to, and I talk about that evolution of coming to peace with that, it was where God wanted me to be. And that's what I say in the end, is it was where I was supposed to be. And making peace with that was challenging, but the best thing that I did to help myself move forward, accept my fate in life or in death, and ultimately perform my job to the best of my ability. So yes, I do it all over again. Going back to your question of someone who's thinking about a life in the military and things like that. I'm a big fan, of course, but I would say for sure, make sure that it's something that suits you. Talk to the people who've been there before you. Go talk to someone who has been in the military or might be doing the job that you're looking at doing in the military, and just ask them the questions about what the life is like. So as much as you can, going into it, what you're signing up for, because it's not for everybody. There's a lot of parts of it that, some people would not thrive in. But beyond that, if you've done your homework and you've got your heart and mind balanced, your body fit, then you grab that fistful of courage and go after it.
Yeah. So that's incredible. And, so you did it, you went to medical school first, and then can you do it the opposite way as well? And which would you do it? Would you go back and do it the same way that you did it?
They've changed things a little bit with the Navy scholarship. The answer is yes, you can. In some cases, they'll allow you to join after you've completed medical school, but in most cases, you need to make the commitment in advance.
Okay, awesome.
I will tell you, it's interesting, a couple things that they've changed. I told you, and I wrote in the book, I was plucked out of residency training only 1 year in, so I was just a baby doctor. Right. All civilian doctors have to complete full residency to practice medicine independently. In the military, when I was in, that wasn't the case. There's a war going on, they can pluck you out. They've changed that rule since, where you have to complete full residency. So, of course, me and some of the, senior Navy physicians, we kind of have this chip on our shoulders that we did it the hard way. The other part that is different is that, residency training, they put a cap on the number of hours that you can be, at the hospital or on call, because there was a little bit of burnout going on. So I think it was for the right reason. But again, me and those senior guys, we did it the hard way.
Oh yeah, I mean, you guys are doing your residency in the field, getting getting shot at, having mortar fire at you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I have the obviously I'm biased, but I think military medical training is second to none. I think the institutions around the country, whether it's Air Force, Army, or Navy, have some of the best training facilities in the entire United States.
So today, you obviously you have your family practice, and you are the talk about Summit Health Group, because that's kind of the standard in primary care. You are the president and medical director of Summit Health Group. Is that correct?
Yes, it's that's the name of my practice. I have a primary care practice, and we have an integrated practice. So we have physical therapy, we have chiropractic, and we offer that full spectrum within our practice. I have 2 physician assistants that work with me. They're also primary care, and then we have a doctor of physical therapy and a doctor of chiropractic medicine as well, and a number of techs and assistants. There's about 20 of us all together, and we're in Thousand Oaks, California, and I love what we do. We have a great team, and we have 2 military members on staff. One's a physician assistant, one's a medical assistant, and so it's a lot of fun working with them.
Wow, that's incredible. As we kind of go to the end of this, obviously we're still in the pandemic right now. It's been a huge challenge for everybody, whether it's in the medical field or the education field or in the military or everybody, right? So how have you guys been able to kind of adapt and kind of continue going and providing the service to people and medical care?
Yeah, you're right. It is a challenge, and I draw on some of my skills I learned in Navy and in field medicine, even in a situation like this. Because this pandemic is a moving target. It's an evolving real world situation. So when you watch my medical minutes that I post on Instagram and things like that, I'll sometimes use that analogy that this is like a battlefield. It's an ever changing, unpredictable environment. This virus, this disease, it's changing. We're learning as we go. It's a new enemy. We're developing new defensive weapons and new offensive weapons. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And we have to adjust what we do and even the advice that we give to patients as we go forward. And that's hard and challenging for patients, for the public to understand, because something that worked one day maybe doesn't work the next day, or advice changes.
Right.
So that's the analogy that I use, and I try to help my patients I break it down like that to help them understand and know that we're doing the best we can in an ever-changing environment.
Yeah, I think more people need to realize that, whether it's coming from a medical standpoint, education standpoint, or whatever it is, leadership, as we're in this and we're learning as we go and we're adapting, and you have to be adaptable, right? And some people say, oh, something you said this one day and you said this the other day, but it's the situation we're in that we're always adapting and learning from yesterday. Every day's a new day right now, and
that's right.
So I appreciate what you guys are doing and helping everyone in the medical field and providing that medical care. So thanks for all you guys are doing. I appreciate it, and it's crazy times. But going back to, you kind of mentioned your Monday talks, your Monday minutes. I love those little videos that you guys are putting out. Talking about COVID. There's obviously misinformation here and there and different things, but I know one of the last videos I've seen of yours, you had kind of mentioned, obviously with the vaccine, beating both vaccines and the booster, obviously that we've kind of seen that you're less likely. So what have you guys kind of seen, and would you recommend, obviously, whether it's a booster or whatever that is? And
give you a quick snapshot on that. And for your listeners, they can follow me at DocWilkes1 on Instagram. So this is a good example of what I was just referring to, an ever-changing environment and taking new information and new data. And so I tell my patients to follow the experts who have committed their life to science and medicine for their entire career, because that tradition of science and medicine hasn't changed. That's what we signed up for. We don't have any other skin in the game. So with the third dose that you asked about, how do we know that we need a third one? Because that's, confusing to some people. Number one, I'll tell them, well, if you look at the history of, let's say, any vaccination, let's take polio, because that virus came out, in the 1950s. And there's a great picture I found of Elvis Presley getting his polio vaccine. Well, how many vaccinations did they determine you need for polio? 4 vaccines, right? So 4 shots. That's what they figured gave adequate protection against polio. We still don't know that with coronavirus. We're still figuring it out.
Right.
We're still following this enemy, learning about it, and understanding how immunity works to achieve adequate protection. Right now, when they've taken, let's say, the blood of an individual who's had 3 doses of the vaccine versus the blood of an individual who has only 2, and they see how those antibody levels attack the virus and what level of protection, they've determined without a doubt 3 is better than 2. So that's where the booster shot comes in. So it's a hands down yes. Obviously, this should come from your doctor because there's rare individuals that would not get the third dose. But for most patients, it's the third one definitely provides a level of protection. Not blanket. It doesn't mean you can't get sick. We know that.
Absolutely.
But it keeps the severity of the disease and your chances of being hospitalized or severely ill to a minimum. That's the main benefit.
How about someone maybe that's gotten that they're not vaccinated, but they've gotten COVID and they've recovered? Should they still get the vaccine? Would you still recommend getting the vaccines as well for those people?
It's a great question. So we know that we achieve immunity in different ways. One way is getting the disease. That's a risky way, because
Sure.
some people suffer severely.
Absolutely.
But nevertheless, assuming you survive, you come out of that with some really good immunity. And then the other main way is vaccination. And so definitely achieving optimal immunity can occur in both those manners, having the disease, being vaccinated. And what the data has seen in many instances is the best immunity is someone who had the disease, got COVID, did well, survived, and then follows that up with vaccination, or vice versa. The point is some of the best immunity is seen in patients who've had both avenues of achieving that immunity. Clearly, though, the safest way, assuming you didn't get COVID, the safest way is to be vaccinated. That way, if you get the disease, you have the best chances of having a less severe form of it, and you're going to come away with it with some even better immunity because you had the virus.
Thank you for answering those questions. I think some questions I had, and then some other people might be listening that might have, and hopefully they'll be able to take that and contact their own physician and make that decision if they haven't yet.
That's right. It's all about just having the right information,
Yeah.
and then and trustworthy information, and then you're empowering that person to make the best decision for themselves.
Absolutely. So, on a personal and professional level, what are some goals you have for yourself moving forward? What are some things you would like to pursue and accomplish, kind of moving into the future?
Yeah, great question. Well, I'd love to see the book become a movie. I'll just throw it right out there. So,
That'd be amazing.
I'm working with some people, and there's some talk in the background. We'll see what happens. That would be a lot of fun. And I'm taking this journey where it takes me. I don't have one specific goal with the book. My first goal was, can I get it published? And to be honest, I thought at many moments that was gone. But I took the path where it led me, kept my faith. I'm certainly very spiritual. And at every step, my path led me in the right direction as I continue to, follow it where it led me and keep that faith. So the book has opened up speaking opportunities. I'm doing that a lot. Like, yourself, you reached out. Some churches have reached out, more podcasts, some radio interviews. I'm going to a Peace Officers Association meeting in Los Angeles to speak to those officers. So I love the speaking part. I'm seeing where that goes. And then, the social media part, doing my little Instagram posts and things like that. And just trying to be of service. I'll leave it at that. that's where I'm headed.
Yeah. So where can people follow you personally, and then obviously professionally as well?
Yeah, on pretty much all social media sites, it's at Doc Wilkes 1. You can also get a glimpse of my book and chapter summaries and little video clips and all my social media interviews on my website, which is coderedfallujah.com. And I love to hear from anybody and everybody, so you can email me or instant message me.
Yeah, and last couple little segments here. For those whoever it is, what would you tell people that maybe they want to go into the medical field, maybe they want to go into the military or start their own practice or go into business? You've experienced a lot of different transitions in your life. What would you tell them in order to be successful? What does it take? What have you kind of learned? What advice would you give them?
I will summarize that in the final chapter of my book, which is called The Message. And, that was just my way of summarizing my roughly 10 years of life experience from medical school through the military. And so my summary statement for your listeners is get your heart and mind balanced, get your body fit, grab a fistful of courage, and then go after it. And briefly, what I mean and what I'm referring to there, and I expand on it a little bit in the book, is having your heart and mind balanced is the first step. And that might mean making amends with someone in your life that you need to make amends with. It might mean understanding where spirituality lies in your life. For me, it's Jesus Christ. It might mean releasing anger, fear, guilt. Or it might mean simply just coming to peace with where you're at in your life and your path. So, heart and mind balanced, get your body fit, and that's just good old-fashioned nutrition and exercise. But I think we miss out on that a lot of times. So healthy sleep, diet, exercise, good combination of those things will prepare you and have your body in optimal shape for the challenges that lie ahead. And these challenges can be anything. It doesn't have to be going off into a combat deployment. And then finally, when you've done your preparation, and this is different for everybody, how much time this takes obviously is different, but it's not going to be quick. But when you feel like you're ready and you've got your sights set on the next goal in your life, the next challenge, whatever it is you want to do, then you say, I've done my best. I understand that I'm going forward and I could fail, and that's okay. You'll adjust course. And so you grab that courage and you go after it.
Wow, it's incredible.
And have your team of people supporting you along the way, whether that's your parents, your friends, your family, your pastor. Have those people to support you.
That's a perfect segue into our last segment because we don't do any of this alone, right? It takes a team. It takes so many different people to make this all happen, whether it's in the military, whether it's in medical profession or in business, whatever that is. Last segment is called the Freedom Fighter of the Week. This is someone, Dr. Wilkes, that's been influential in your life into helping you get to where you are today. And it could be more than one person as well. So you don't have to choose just one necessarily, but who is the Freedom Fighter of the Week?
I love it. I'm going to go with some of the individuals that supported my book and also endorsed it. So first, I'm going to give a shout out to Gary Sinise, also known as Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump. Mm-hmm. I met him in Iraq on my second tour. And then I happened to run into him when I was back home because he lives in my area. I reached out to him when I was trying to get the book published, and he was kind enough to throw his endorsement at it. And proud to say we've become friends. And his foundation, the Gary Sinise Foundation, is just one of the best organizations I've ever been a part of. My practice supports it. We're actually running a little charity for it right now. And he's one of the biggest supporters of our first responders, military members across the United States. So Gary Sinise, and then a shout out to General Mattis. He was, as you'll read in the book, he gave us marching orders into Iraq. That was one of his last major field commands out there in the Battle of Fallujah. And I got my manuscript in front of him, and I received a call from him one day. He said, Doc, I think you've got a good project here, and I'm going to support it. So he was very kind to support me. And Rob Riggle, he is, as you know, an actor, also a military supporter, and a over 20-year veteran himself. And he endorsed my book as well. So I appreciate the time that those fine people lended to support my project.
It's incredible, right? It takes so many people, and you never know who's going to kind of step up. And when they do, it's just it's incredible to kind of get that message out, and it just continues going. So yeah, anyone listening, go check the book out. Incredible read, whether you listen to Audible or read the actual book. It's called Code Red Fallujah, as we mentioned before, a doctor's memoir at war. Such a unique, powerful perspective from Dr. Wilkes that we have on here today, and highly recommend it. So go check it out. And thank you so much, Dr. Wilkes, for taking the time to be with us today. I know you're busy with everything going on right now, and it's we're so grateful, so humbled, and honored to have you on today.
It's been a pleasure, Blaine. I've got my first patient in the room, so I'm going to go get at it. But thanks for what you do, this podcast, and just being an example and a leader yourself. It's great to see.